Good morning, everyone. It's Monday, March the 9th, and welcome to 7 Investing Live. This is our show that we run every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time to spotlight several of the stock market's most intriguing opportunities. You can also see all of our official recommendations and our monthly best buys at 7investing.com, where your first 7 days are entirely free. You can sign up at 7investing.com/subscribe. My name is Simon Erickson. I'm the founder of 7 Investing. I'm excited about today's show because we're going to do another watch list review. We did this a couple months ago when we spotlighted some of the research opportunities that we had not yet added to the scorecard, but we think they're interesting. And we did this, like I said, just a couple of months ago. We highlighted Zeta Global. We highlighted Broadcom, two companies that were both taking advantage of AI in their own way. And we're going to focus on two more of those companies that we added here in February. And those companies are the quantum computing company Infleqtion and the memory provider Micron. And so we're going to jump into both of those. I've got my colleague Heather Horton here with me who's going to ask some questions. Please feel free to ask questions along the way. But again, a reminder, the watch list is companies that we find that are intriguing. We're not entirely bought in yet, but we see something that we like, whether it's financial results, whether it's an interesting technology, maybe an interesting partnership. Something is there that is warranting a little bit more research that might lead to an official recommendation on the 7 Investing scorecard. And of course, we track everything that we make an official recommendation, 7investing.com/recommendations. We follow along with all those and can add to them over time through our monthly best buys process. But let's jump into these two opportunities first and foremost. The first is Micron. I'm going to start with the larger one of these. So we're going to start with Micron, which most people are probably already familiar with this company. It's a well-established business. It's one of the largest memory providers in the semiconductor industry. And Micron has been a great company for a long time, but really finds itself in a perfect situation right now, which is the demand for AI is just leading to a severe shortage of high bandwidth memory. And a review of what's going on here, always hear about the processors that were being manufactured by Nvidia, by AMD, whoever it might be that's going to the data center, that's actually doing the execution of code. The processing itself and the computing itself is done by these processors, but it's the memory that's feeding it to them, feeding them the information that they need to make these decisions and do these executions of the code. And so one of the bottlenecks of AI right now, as we've seen it, is there's just not enough memory available for the breakneck speed of these deployments that we're seeing. And two, it's not fast enough to get the information to these really optimized AI processors to do their thing. It's like going to the all-you-can-eat buffet, but you can only go to the buffet table once an hour. You've got a limiting factor. You want to go out there and get as much, whatever it is as you can, but you're limited on how fast you can get access to it. It's the same thing with memory being the bottleneck for AI processors and the AI demand in general. And so the first one that I want to look at is Micron. Micron's ticker is MU. This is a company that's already very large and already at scale, but I think their results are what I would consider insanely good right now. In fact, I'm not even sure the last time that I saw a company of this size expand its profit margins so quickly. Heather, we've got a graphic on here, hopefully of their most recent quarterly results from Micron. Yep, perfect. Here it is. Riverside will agree with us. Sometimes Riverside throws us a nice curveball, but there was a result of their financial summary here for the first quarter of 2026. Their fiscal quarter of 2026 shows the revenue. Perfect. There it was, of showing the revenue growth and kind of the margin profile as we walk down that. There it is. And you can kind of see first quarter 2026 versus first quarter 2025 over there on the right-hand side. Look at how the gross margin of a company this size, it's doing $13.6 billion in quarterly revenue, has expanded its gross margins by 16 percentage points. That's 1,600 basis points, going from 40% gross margin a year ago to, rounded up, even 57% gross margin here this year. And their operating income similarly by 20 percentage points, from 27% a year ago to 47% this year. And even the net income line item, 23% net income margin a year ago to 40% this year. That is insanely good. How do you have a company that's doing $13 billion of quarterly revenue, increasing your margins by basically 20 percentage points in a single year? Unbelievable. And the answer is just a massive amount of demand for Micron's highest margin products, We've got another slide here. I'd like to show the market outlook that they put together in their investing presentation that shows that the AI buildouts have just been so aggressive recently, right? In their own words, they have driven a sharp increase in demand forecasts for memory and storage. And by the way, this is not just all memory is created equal. Micron's most demanded memory is what it's calling high bandwidth memory. HBM is an acronym for that. But this is something that, is even more supply constrained because in addition to the capacity that they have that's already been kind of stretched, high bandwidth memory, just the manufacturing process of it, is a 3-to-1 trade ratio with DDR5. Meaning if you wanted to make DDR the traditional memory that they have, if you wanted high bandwidth memory with the supply constraints and the equipment and the necessity for what it is to manufacture that in the first place, it's basically going to take 3 units of memory in the past to produce 1 unit of HBM memory going forward, which just further complicates the supply imbalance, makes it even harder to manufacture the most compelling memory that you need out there. But again, back to the demand for AI's thirst for very, very high speed memory. It's the HBM. This is the product that needs to happen if you're going to really want to unleash the power of AI. And so this is what the largest companies are asking for, is the fastest, the highest bandwidth memory that's out there. And of course, what does Micron do when you've got something that's absolutely necessary? You're the largest supplier of it, and you're already supply constrained. They sell it at as high of a price as they possibly can. And that's why you see this margin profile basically doubling in year-over-year comparisons. This is not expected to slow down anytime soon. Micron also announced in its first quarter 2026 results that it's completely sold out of HBM supply for the rest of 2026. All of the supply that it can put out of its latest and greatest products is locked up in long-term supply agreements that are already committed through the rest of this fiscal year. If you're an investor, if you're an institutional investor especially, and you see something like that with a company whose finances are increasing aggressively in the best possible way, and you're completely sold out, you've got the visibility and the transparency of the future revenue streams because it's already committed and it's already sold out. This is the dream scenario. And so it's no surprise that Micron's stock has done as well as it has in recent months and within the recent 12 months. And people are saying, Simon, is Micron overpriced? Is this a stock that you can still get into? I think so. We looked at it for the watch list here. I've got some more behind the curtain at 7investing in the research that we published there. But, at a recent price of $412, market cap of around $464 billion, I don't think it's too aggressive. And by the way, revenue is growing at 57% year over year to $13.6 billion. Micron has come out and said, even though we're converting 62% of our revenues in operating cash flow today, we're going to spend aggressively on CapEx to make sure that we're fulfilling those demand and that we can get even more customers lined up for the future. We're sold out right now. We want to make sure we have plenty of capacity going forward. And so it wants to spend $20 billion this year on CapEx. That's pretty aggressive for a company. But again, what are you going to do? You can't let those orders, fall through the cracks. You've got to make sure you're fulfilling demand, especially in this part of the cycle where your customers are asking for more. So I think that, in my opinion, knowing that Micron is in the middle of building this massive New York fab that's going to cost up to $100 billion for more capacity out there, and the CapEx budget that it's got, and on top of that, the margin profile that is just continuing to inch higher as it's selling its most highly in demand, highest priced, and highest profit margin products, I think you've got kind of this confluence of really good things happening. And it's almost hard to call the stock overvalued right now when you see all of the good news that's going on out there. So Micron, a company, again, this is one that we wanted to put on the watch list. I think that it's done well. It's been a fantastic business to own for several years, but I also think that there's more upside ahead here because I don't see this AI train slowing down. And certainly memory is still the bottleneck. The running joke is if you're stuck on a deserted island in the middle of the ocean and you can only put 4 letters into the sand, don't write help. Just write 3 letters. Just write HBM. Or if you have to write DRAM, write something where there's memory that's, that's alluded to. Because if you write help, nobody's going to show up. And if you write DRAM, you're going to be surrounded by ships within 5 minutes. It just kind of shows what's going on in the world of AI. Micron is in a perfect place to position themselves and to capitalize on this. MU is the ticker on Micron. Heather, I'm going to stop myself there and open it up if you have any questions about this one. Again, a fantastic business in the right place at the right time.
Good morning. Yeah, first, why is this a watch list stock and not a primary recommendation?
It's a fantastic question, and one I think I need to take some responsibility on because we should have added it a year ago before the stock went on its point of inflection. We were still, at least in my opinion, I was still obsessed with the processors. I was really obsessed with the Nvidias and the AMDs, focusing my attention on the computing side of this rather than the memory side. It was a natural miss. And not to say that Nvidia and AMD didn't do really well themselves, but certainly we could have put Micron on the scorecard earlier than this. I still think that the trend is in place. I think they're a good one to capitalize on it. Let's fix some of those whiffs that we had in the past and get it on the scorecard anyway, knowing it's a little bit more expensive today than it was then.
I mean, they're still wins. They're all good stocks. Do you think that this kind of amazing financials can continue into the next years? I mean, it sounds like yes, with what they're building out.
The question is going to be capacity, right? Like if you believe these
Mhm.
forecasts of $1.5 trillion that even just OpenAI is planning on either its own CapEx budget or more likely its partners' CapEx budgets, that's a huge amount of demand. We're still in the early innings of how many of these processors we can sell. The question is how many can we make? Because
Mhm.
not only Micron is kind of supply constrained on memory, but Taiwan Semi can only get so big so quickly in terms of manufacturing the processors themselves. And even though Nvidia and AMD and everybody else, Intel, whoever else, wants to be right there and put in their orders and tie up the production lines, there is still supply constraints and there is still geopolitical issues that are a factor in all of this. And so the numbers look good, the forecasts look good. We know AI is a big deal. We know companies want to move fast, but it's like, is it really going to happen as quickly as we think? And if you see a hiccup anywhere along the process that derails this, whether that's China and Taiwan, whether that's manufacturing capacity, whatever it is, there's a lot of dominoes downstream of that that could be impacted. So while I'm excited during the best of times right now, where we see all of the what could potentially happen, you got to be a little bit wary as an investor that sometimes things don't work out like they were expected to. And if that does, a lot of these companies, Micron included, are priced at a premium, at least compared to the historic multiples.
It still seems like a decent bedrock stock for to have in your portfolio within the AI space.
100%. A small little dividend while you wait. It's nice to see a little bit of return of capital. Shareholders pretty conservatively managed. Not a team that's going out there and doing the most creative, innovative things of the world, but they know their niche and they know what they're good at, and they're making a lot of money off of it. Why not exploit that and take full advantage of what you're good at?
Perfect. Thank
So
you.
Yep. So that's Micron. MU again, the ticker on that one. That's the first one on the watch list that we want to talk. Let's shift gears. Let's talk about a much smaller company. Keeping in mind that Micron is worth nearly $500 billion in market cap. Let's go to the other side of the spectrum. Let's look at a very small cap company worth only $2 billion in market cap. The next one on our watch list is called Infleqtion. The ticker on that one is INFQ. This very recently came public. It actually just joined the public markets last month on February the 17th. It became traded on the NYSE through a SPAC demerger. This is a company that merged previously with Churchill Capital. For those who are familiar with the special purpose acquisition companies, the SPACs basically go out there and they find a financial partner. You create a blank check company, as they used to be called, and then you hit the public markets through a reverse merger, a SPAC demerger. And they typically come public at a price right around $10 a share, as has been to the tradition. But now you've got a publicly traded vehicle that gets to avoid a lot of the complex IPO prospectus, paperwork you had to go through, all the the hoops you had to jump through if you want to go through a traditional IPO. There's a way to bypass that. But again, a lot of people kind of you raise an eyebrow when you hear SPACs because these were so popular in 2021. You got to go out there and show the hockey stick of growth. Some companies didn't quite live up to the expectations. And so when you say SPAC, it's almost like a four-letter word. It is because a lot of investors got burned right out of the gate. That's why this is on the watch list rather than just an immediate recommendation. There's a lot more research that needs to go into this. But on the other hand, not all SPACs were bad buying opportunities. Rocket Lab was a SPAC in 2025. It turned out to be a fantastic investment that is doing incredibly well, raised money at exactly the right time, put a lot of money on its balance sheet, and then use that in very, very good ways to increase shareholder value over time. So not all SPACs are bad, but Infleqtion is one that requires a little bit more work. Infleqtion is a quantum computing company. Quantum computing is a type of computing that is for the most advanced, most complex workloads that are out there that just cannot be done today by GPU accelerators, by traditional CPUs, by the types of processors that we have out there. There are some problems that just can't be solved because there's too many variables and there's too much going on for a traditional computing processor, a classical computer, if you'd like to call it that, to even be able to handle. And so you've got a new field of quantum computing, which goes back to quantum physics and quantum science and things that Richard Feynman was looking at 30 years ago, 50 years ago, really, that have just now started getting a lot more attention because we've got the tools to be able to harness these new quantum technologies today. And is there an application for quantum? Yes, there is. Whether it might be protein folding and modeling simulations for drug discovery. Maybe it's very, very complex things for the design of new materials, superconducting materials for the grid, for the electrical grid, whatever it might be, for power production, for AI, whatever it might be, for space technology. There's some really cool problems that we've been thinking about for a long time, and we've never been able to fully solve. And now quantum technologies and quantum computing would be the types of processors that, at least theoretically, could be able to solve those based on the limitations we haven't been able to solve them in the past. And so Infleqtion is the next company to go public that is a quantum computing company. We saw IonQ do this just recently, also in a SPAC transaction a couple of years ago. And Infleqtion is now in the public markets. Again, very small, $2 billion, still mostly a research project. Only did, I believe, $19 million of revenue last year. Keeping in mind, this is a $2 billion market cap. So we're at about call it 100 times sales for Infleqtion right now. That is really, really pricey. Keep in mind, you've never really had a commercial contract. Most of this is just research work. They've sold a handful of their quantum processors that are out there. But the technology itself is neat. This is something that is called neutral atom quantum technology. It's very different than ion trapping, which has been kind of the go-to technology we've seen so far. IonQ wants to have charged particles, ions, if you want to, that you can then manipulate, you can trap them, and then for a very, very short coherence time, actually see how they're actually reacting out there. That's what a quantum computing is doing. It's the spin of electrons rather than the flow of electrons that you're measuring. This is not the typical silicon-based integrated circuit. This is a quantum computer that has got different laws and different rules. But again, because of the states of the technology and the way that they're doing things, those quantum entrapments, the things that they're doing right there, can able to handle very, very hard problems that have got hundreds of thousands, if not millions of inputs, all doing things at exactly the same time. That's why quantum's so interesting. That's why IonQ was so interesting. And now you've got Infleqtion coming out here and say, hey, we don't want to do ions. We don't want to have charged particles. We don't want to do ion trapping. We want to have a neutral atom quantum technology. And so to do this, you don't have to have super, super cold chambers where the atoms aren't moving around at all, right? You want to have zero interference out there. You want to make sure you're able to manipulate the atoms in a way that you can look at only the things you want to look at, not external noise. And so what they're doing is they're actually manipulating cesium atoms in a vacuum, but they're doing it with lasers at room temperature. Room temperature is the key on this, because now all of a sudden you don't have to have something at a very, very, very low temperature. Something like that allows the scale up potentially in a way that your traditional technologies cannot do, at least not right now. And they might even be able to allow for longer coherence times, which is the meat that you're getting. This is the meat on the bone where you're actually measuring what the quantum computer is doing before you have interference that happens downstream. And so again, this is complex. This is a hard problem of quantum computing that's got a very detailed roadmap. And grab your coffee, because we're going to show a graphic here from the National Institute of Quantum Computing that's going to show you the different approaches you can have to quantum technologies. Over there on the far left, if we can keep that up, Heather, I love that graphic. We're going to look at a little bit of what's going on out here. The noisy intermediate scaled quantum era, the NISQ era on the far left, is kind of where we've been so far, right? This is ion, and look at the bottom of this graph shows the hardware, right? Can you even make a quantum computer that is reliable, right? Can you even do this? Is kind of the bottom part, the lowest part of the y-axis there. And then if you can, you want to scale that up and start getting the software and the algorithms that, it's going to actually make this work for a company that wants to define a problem for you. And then at the very, very top, you start seeing the applications, the use cases. And so in this noisy intermediate quantum area that we've been on the far left here, we've got some quantum computing hardware. We've got some stuff out there like ion trapping. That's IonQ that did that. We've got superconducting quantum computers. That's what Google was working on, very, very, very cold superconductive quantum computers. And now you're starting to see some more hardware entering this space, one of which might be the neutral atom approach that we're seeing with Infleqtion. But you're going to see that move up this scale. Once you got a hardware that can work, you've got a quantum computer that's actually possible, you start saying, can you integrate this with other applications, with other softwares, with the other libraries that are out there with traditional technologies? Because no quantum computer is working alone. It's going to be working with a GPU accelerator. It's going to be working with the classical computer. You've got to have them on the same page and communicating on who's running what code out there. And then ultimately at the very top, this is where you actually get the bang for your buck. You actually start using it on applications commercially, and you're making companies some dollars out there. So this is kind of what the roadmap looks like. It's complex. There's each one of those dots you see, or each one of those line items that you see, has got people doing lifetimes worth of research and then really pushing for their approach. But keep in mind, there's a lot of different ways we can go with this, and Infleqtion is just one of those. So now let's look at Infleqtion specifically. This is a great graphic. Thank you, Heather. Let's put up the one that Infleqtion has got out there about why it thinks that neutral atom technology is so interesting. This is a good one that shows, there's actually one other graphic. I'll come back to this one in a moment if you could. I'd like to see the one that shows Infleqtion first mover in neutral atom architecture. This is one that kind of shows about why is our technology so interesting? Why is it what we're doing is so cool compared to the other ones that are out there? And it kind of shows, this would be something that could be commercially scalable. It's got longer coherence times. It's got excellent control, and it's got universal connectivity. When you look at that detailed roadmap that we just showed a second ago, you've got kind of all these branches and all these different ways you can go with quantum. We've now got Infleqtion taking one other technology opportunity and then trying the best that they can to get this to be the go-to one. And then now I'll come back to that previous graphic, if we could, about why can you get this to work and play nice with other technologies out there? And it's because you've not just now got the hardware, right? You've got, oh, you're perfect. Thank you very much. You've not only got the core on the far left, that's the hardware. Does it actually work? Is the neutral atom approach going to even be functional? And can you scale it? Can you actually do the computing at a larger level? And then the even more interesting thing is can you get that software stack on the far right? Can you get this to do machine learning applications and tie it in with another machine? And so this is why I think that we want to pay a little bit of attention to Infleqtion, is because they've got a growing partnership with Nvidia right now in place. And Nvidia's got a lot of partnerships, so let's not read too much into this, but let's just, put the hypothesis out there that if Infleqtion can scale up its Qlink interface, which is basically the communication of the quantum computer doing its thing, and then letting Nvidia through CUDA do its thing as well with the GPU accelerators, can you get both of those on the same page and talking to each other? So at the end of the day, you're executing code without any fault, without any errors, and as efficiently as you possibly can for the most complex of workloads. This is why Jensen Huang from Nvidia last fall came out and had its own GTC conference for Nvidia, and he said, I embrace quantum computing. They're not displacing Nvidia. They're not getting us to be obsolete. GPUs are still going to be doing the workload of all these AI, all the code is still going to be run primarily on GPU. But there's some things we can't do. I embrace and ask for you, quantum computer providers, to go out there and do these things that we can marry the two of these together and solve the world's hardest problems. Now, when you have Nvidia and Jensen Huang, who's in charge of the world's most valuable company, America's most valuable company, numero uno in the S&P 500, come out there and saying, hey, I want you guys to do this. And by the way, we've got a partnership with Infleqtion that's already integrated with CUDA. There's something to this. This is not just a pipe dream that couldn't go anywhere. And so this $29 million, excuse me, I said 19 earlier, it's actually $29 million of revenue they did last year. Could that hit an inflection point just like IonQ did when it started going from proof of concept at a research level to large contract agreement, either with the Defense Department or with DARPA, to all of a sudden commercial applications where you've got companies buying your computers and integrating them? Yes, I absolutely think there is a possibility for this. Disclaimer, do not go out there and put your entire portfolio into Infleqtion. That is a bad capital allocation move. This is at this point still a very high risk, very high reward opportunity. But man, I'm excited about the potential. It's worthy of a spot on the watch list. And that's why we're taking a closer look at Infleqtion here in this month. And I'm kind of excited to do a little bit more research on them. Again, INFQ, Heather, that's the ticker on the NYSE. It's now public for about a month, but kind of pumped up about this one. I'm kind of excited to drink a lot of coffee and learn more about them.
I did finally get that graphic, and it is very cool. So I will throw that up. Yeah, quantum computing is so no, that's I am really sorry, everyone.
We need Riverside to use the Infleqtion quantum computers. Oh, there we go. There we go. Perfect.
Yeah, Riverside and I are having a little bit of a fight today, but we'll be fine. But we have some really interesting comments from Brandon Gitless 7191, show on stream. Simon, I've been studying quantum industry for 5 years. Infleqtion is the most interesting company to hit the markets in quantum since IonQ. Some of their material misses IconQ's progress. Love that. And then we also have from him as well. Well, Jensen only did it because he tanked the quantum markets 40% when he talked out the other side of his mouth. Invited everyone in to admit he was wrong. Well, it's important to admit you can be wrong. It's great to have a quantum expert on here.
So this is why I love the live stream show. Thank you, Brandon, first of all, for watching, and secondly, for adding some great insights. You know, if you've been following the quantum industry for 5 years, I would love to have you on a future live stream show where, you know, we have you as a guest to talk about this. This is the style of investing that I embrace. You know, this is why I went to the MIT conferences and saw the PhDs on stage talking about these cool quantum computers they were building. And, you know, it's kind of interesting to be an investor in the audience as opposed to being a CTO in the audience, because I have to think about it from the other perspective too, of like, I don't want to get too excited about anybody on stage, because there's still like that, I've got that eyebrow raising of like, are you actually going to make money off of this? Or is this something that's, you know, going to consume a lot of cash and then go bust for an investor? I'm not saying that is in any way what's going to happen with Infleqtion. I've always been a natural skeptic of a lot of this. Oh, and by the way, not a quantum scientist, just an investor. Love to come on. Brandon, let's set it up. You know, let's talk either on X or on YouTube or whatever else. Let's get you on the show. I'd love to hear your perspectives on this. And
yeah, just send a private DM with your info on one or the other.
And Heather, you know this already, that over a 4-year period, I went to 46 technical conferences in a row. I went to every month for 4 years, except for 2 months. One was when my daughter was born, and the other was we had a family big Christmas one month. But every single other month, I was at a technical conference, you know, jotting down notes relentlessly with my laptop and then bringing them to 7investing. There is something to this. I agree with you 100% that this is an interesting company and the most interesting one since IonQ. I actually talked with Chris Monroe, the founder of IonQ, before they went public, before they did the SPAC, and kind of talked about, you know, what he was interested in. By the way, he's a terrible presenter. He's not good on stage, but he is a brilliant scientist in the things that he's doing. And just to see the excitement of why they're doing this in the first place, I think there's something to that. And I want to look closer at Infleqtion going forward, because I agree with you. I see the same thing with them. This is a new approach that we haven't seen before. And it definitely, as an investor that wants to be ahead of the curve on this, is worth a lot more attention.
I think something that both you and Brandon could probably say much more eloquently, much more quickly, but why quantum computing versus not traditional computing, standard computing, was that really hit me was years ago when I was working at another financial company. We were talking about it, and the fact that something that would take a traditional computer, you know, 100,000 years, which is just a wild concept because computers are fast, can be done by a quantum computer in under a day.
Yeah.
And that is why, like, they are capable of things that a standard computer cannot do in our lifetime within minutes. And it's just a whole nother level of computing. The way computing changed everything from how we would do things with calculators, you know, that we're still powerful. And, you know, it was just a whole nother level of giving us abilities to move forward.
There's another element of this too, Heather, which you you just pointed out, which is the fear element. The fear element brings money into this field, because when you don't fully understand something that could be very bad if you fall behind your rivals, you put money behind this. You put government contracts into this, you put defense contracts into this, you put research grants into this. There is a lot at stake with quantum being able to do things that other computers can't. The most commonly cited one of those being encryption. RSA encryption today involves these algorithms that classical computers just can't solve. They're too complex. So when you put your information, over the internet and it's encrypted, you feel pretty safe about doing that. But could a quantum computer very, very solve those encryption algorithms in a way the classical computer cannot? And then all of a sudden, could all of your rivals, whether that's enterprise rivals, whether that's national security rivals, whatever it might be, quickly just see everything that you have, all the information that you've encrypted before? Yes, maybe, or open up a zillion things. What else could you solve that your rivals could not solve? And then how do you use that to be an advantage? I mean, things like that are the reason that the valuations, we're going to grant them premium valuations because of things like that, because the fear index, the capital that's going to be going into this might not necessarily immediately commercially translate. It doesn't have to be, okay, it's this times price to sales, it's this times price to earnings. It's like when you see the money is there and it's available and you want to encourage quantum computing technologies to come out there and do their thing, we're going to be a little bit more grace to some of these early stage companies that you now see come into the public markets. It's just a fascinating dynamic that's happening in the world right now, and quantum plays an important part of where this goes. So I think we might leave it at that. We're at the end of the show. We're at 7:33, so we run a little bit long. I love this, Brandon. Thank you for the great comments and the questions. Heather is going to coordinate with you to have you as a guest on a future show. We're going to follow up and talk about quantum again. I actually want to talk about some of the other companies too. I've talked many times at 7 Investing about IonQ. I want to dig a little bit into quantum annealing and D-Wave systems and kind of where do they play in this. And then we might even see a new company called Quantinuum hit the public markets here later in 2026. We've alluded to them several times behind the paywall, but I want to bring that a little bit more public because I think it's getting some investor attention. There's some neat hardware layer stuff that we're kind of pushing up into that full stack ecosystem and the software. And then, of course, the next layer, like we saw from the graphic, of applications would soon follow right after that. Some cool stuff going on in quantum. I'm excited to see where Infleqtion goes with all of this. Again, Infleqtion was INFQ. That's traded on the NYSE if you want to follow up on that company. And Micron was on the NASDAQ as MU was the ticker for Micron if you wanted to follow up with them. And again, those are our two watch list stocks for February 2026. I'm going to be putting out a new March 2026 watch list for 7 Investing here in about a week and a half. I always enjoy these. I always love kind of the open sourcing of research ideas and reaching out and kind of seeing a bunch of perspectives on these new pipeline of ideas that we bring into 7 Investing. And then actually we followed up on quite a few of them. Even in the last couple of months, companies that have hit the watch list have gone on to become official recommendations, and a lot of them look really strong out of the gate. So those are two more. Again, Micron and Infleqtion are the two for here today. We're building out the agenda here for March. I'm not sure how we're going to structure Wednesday and Friday shows just yet, but I do want to tap into some of the MIT resources that I've got, some of the connections I've got from that, and also some options trading of all things. We haven't talked a lot about options on this show. I think there's a lot of interest in options right now with the market kind of going up and down and being volatile. I'm getting a lot of questions about how can I play sideways markets. We're going to have Jeff Fisher on the show. We're also going to talk to some other options experts on upcoming live streams here in March with the schedule still TBD on what the exact date is going to be for those. But I'm always excited about future live stream shows. I appreciate you tuning into this episode of our 7 Investing live stream for March the 9th. We'll be back again on the 11th. I hope you have a wonderful day. Stay safe out there. We'll see you again on Wednesday.